Good Sunday morning. I'm Evan Donovan. News Channel 8 is your local election headquarters, and this is Politics on Your Side. More mass shootings, migrant caravans, extreme weather. 2018 was another turbulent year for the U.S. Omar Jimenez takes a look at the top national stories that shaped our year.
The death of President George H.W. Bush just 7 months after his wife Barbara capped off a tumultuous year, a rare moment of bipartisanship as the nation came together to mourn.
He showed me what it means to be a president who serves with integrity, leads with courage, and acts with love in his heart for the citizens of our country.
The year began with bullets flying at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. 17 people lost their lives, but a movement was born.
Gun reform now!
The students from Parkland, Florida, lobbied lawmakers for stronger gun control and organized nationwide protests, culminating in the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C.
Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job.
More mass shootings followed. 10 people shot and killed at a high school in Santa Fe, Texas. 12 people shot and killed at a bar in Thousand Oaks, California. And 11 people shot and killed at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. Large groups of migrants banded together to make their way north in search of asylum.
In Honduras, there is no money, no jobs, a lot of crime, there is no security.
In the spring, federal authorities separated thousands of immigrant families at the border as part of a zero-tolerance policy. Images of children wrapped in foil blankets and surrounded by cage-like fencing sparked outrage, and the administration announced it would suspend the practice. In the fall, tensions erupted, prompting a shutdown of the San Diego border crossing for several hours. The confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court turned into another heated political battle. Sexual assault allegations led to dueling testimonies in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes.
This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit.
The midterm elections saw a record turnout at the polls. Democrats took control of the House while Republicans increased their control of the Senate. After the election, the White House dealt with a growing threat from special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. President Trump's former allies, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, and Paul Manafort, all facing varying charges.
Well, I respect the move, but the entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion.
Political rhetoric reached a boiling point when an extremist mailed 14 pipe bombs to prominent Democrats and CNN.
We're going to jump in. There's a fire alarm here.
You might have heard it in the back.
Climate change contributed to a devastating year of natural disasters. 2018 was the most destructive wildfire season on record in California. Rains from Hurricane Florence flooded the Carolina coast, and winds from Hurricane Michael leveled parts of the Florida Panhandle. The Me Too movement celebrated major court victories. Comedian Bill Cosby and former Olympic gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar were sentenced for multiple sex crimes. In the 7 days leading up to Nassar's sentencing, more than 150 young women confronted their abuser in court.
You do realize now that we, this group of women you so heartlessly abused over such a long period of time, are now a force, and you are nothing.
I'm Omar Jimenez reporting.
Those were some of the stories that shaped our lives on the national scale. We're going to bring it a little more local here. 2018 is coming to a close. A fascinating year in politics, and I'm joined here by Jim Waurishuk, who is the Hillsborough County Republican Chair, and Ione Townsend, the Hillsborough County Democratic Chair. I thought it perfect to bring these two in to get their perspectives on this year. Let's start with the 2018 midterm elections, and then we'll move forward into the big races coming up in 2019 and then 2020. First, broadly, turnout in the 2018 midterms in Hillsborough County was 61.51%. You see it right there on your screen. We have about 850,000 registered voters. About 530,000 came out to vote. Again, 61.5%. We'll start with you, Ione. Are you disappointed in that turnout, or was that good for you? What were you expecting?
I think that turnout was very good for a midterm election. Typically, we're around 49%, so 49 to 50%. So that was an extremely high turnout for a midterm election.
Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. It was, as Iona said, very high. I think there was a lot of energy in that from a number of situations, both nationally and in Florida, that brought people out. And I think perhaps that may be a signal for the future elections to come.
That's for sure. We expect 2020 to be a huge one. We're going to break down the 2018 midterms even more. When we get right back, we got to take a commercial break. Stay with us. Welcome back, folks. I'm here with our panelists on this final Sunday of the year. Jim Waurishuk, chair of the Hillsborough County Republican Party. Ione Townsend, chair of the Hillsborough County Democrats. There's some concern among Republican political analysts that Hillsborough County may no longer be a bellwether county, that it is now swinging blue. Voters elected the first Democratic county commission since 2004, majority female county commission. Hillsborough County also voted for Bill Nelson by about 8 points, Andrew Gillum by almost 9 points, and Republican incumbent State Senator Dana Young lost her seat to former State Representative Janet Cruz. Jim, are we a blue county now?
Well, we've always really been a blue county. You can go all the way back to '95, and Democratic voter registration has outnumbered Republicans by 52,000, and it's hemmed and hawed a little bit over the years. Peaked in 2008 during the Obama election to about 70,000, and now it's down to about 65,000 or so. So we see it as always having been a blue county, and Republicans have fared well over the early parts of 2000, from 2004 through now. We held our own. We did very good in our election turnout for Republicans, and so we will brush ourselves off and move forward for 2020 and see what that brings us.
If that's true, I mean, of course it's true. I don't doubt your numbers at all, Jim, but that means that Republicans are doing very well in this county to be that outnumbered, Ione.
Yes, and I think their successes have been the result of a couple of factors. One, gerrymandering that we know about, and the second issue being that a lot of key elections are in midterm elections when Democrats don't typically turn out. This year was different for that.
There was certainly a lot of excitement this year. Despite those county results, the state remained pretty red. Ron DeSantis was elected, though by a very small margin, obviously, 32,000 votes. Rick Scott took Bill Nelson's Senate seat by an even smaller margin. It looks like the final numbers there, just over 10,000 votes, which is crazy, with more than 8 million ballots cast. Republicans maintain their majority in both the state House and the state Senate. So, Ione, we've been thought of as a purple state, but really, are we a red state?
You know, I think we're really a purple state. You know, the last two elections have been red, 16 and 18, but 2008 and 2012 were blue, and at least from the presidential perspective. So I think we're really purple. And I think if you look at the narrowness of the wins of DeSantis and Scott this year, that was certainly more narrow than it was in 2016.
And not bad for a midterm election in terms of Democrats, because they don't usually vote in midterms. Jim.
Right, exactly.
Your thoughts?
I think, well, we're actually statewide a little bit more red than we were in 2016. We took the senatorial race with Rick Scott taking that, and that's the first time in well over 100 years where both senators have been Republican in the state. So that may be an indicator of what we're looking for 2020, and you know, we can talk about that when we get to that point.
Yeah, certainly. I want to talk about two of the referenda that passed here in Hillsborough County. One for schools, the other obviously for transportation. We'll start with the transportation one. I think everyone's kind of watching to see how this works out, because the way the charter was written, it doesn't really involve very many politicians. In fact, it sort of tries to take the politics out of it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Ione? And what are your thoughts about the money that's going to go towards this transportation?
Well, in terms of the money going to transportation, I think it's time that we have done something. Jim and I were talking in the green room about how long it takes us to get downtown and to some of these interviews and to other activities that we're involved in. You know, traffic in Hillsborough County is a bit of a nightmare, and we both live in areas of the state, of the county, where travel is difficult, and I think we've missed some opportunities with transportation in the past, and it is time that we do something.
Obviously, these folks got fed up with politicians. Jim decided to do it themselves.
Well, yeah, they did, but you have to peel back the onion to see how it was done. It was done by a number of private groups with large funding from a number of big donors. I'm really the type of person who wants to see our politicians be held accountable, and they need to speak for what they're going to do with this plan and what it's going to do for the voters and residents of the county. And I think that's the bigger thing. I think when you go back and look at what we're dealing with, you're going to find that it's not going to solve some of the problems, right down to some of the critical things is widening streets where they need to be widened, fixing potholes that need to be fixed. And we know in the county the streets are horrendous, and that money is not even in the plan. So I think what our we have one county commissioner, Stacy White, who has filed suit against this to perhaps bring it back so that they can take a relook at it and find out what you've got to address it from the immediate needs, and there are a lot of immediate needs, and then you've got to look at long-term growth and how that impact is. And I want to hold our politicians accountable to both parties and to the citizens to make sure that happens.
Certainly, I do too. That's what I love doing. We'll get to the school tax in a moment. We have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back, folks. I'm back with the chairs of both Hillsborough County political parties, Jim Waurishuk of the Republicans, Ione Townsend of the Democrats. Wanted to get to the school tax in Hillsborough County, the referendum that passed. Good thing, bad thing? We know the schools need money, teachers need money, but is this the right way to do it, and how do you feel about this one?
Well, I think it's very similar to the transit tax, that the voters have said that the people who are in power to make those kinds of decisions that impact our schools have not made the right choices in their view, and so the citizens moved ahead and approved this amendment. So I think it's a good thing.
Jim?
Yes, there's an opportunity to take advantage of that funding that's going to be there, and I would hope that our elected school board members do the right thing in how they spend that money, correct the immediate needs. We hear all the stories about air conditioning and the physical situation. Security is a big issue because of the shootings that have gone on. So, how do we do this? And let's look at the curriculum. Let's make sure that our kids are, number one, learning what they need to be successful in life, whether it's leading off to college or to go to a vocational school.
And they are the future for sure.
Absolutely.
The Tampa mayoral election is coming up here in March. Very important, obviously, for this area. At least 7 candidates. We've got former Tampa Police Chief Jane Castor, City Councilman Harry Cohen, activist LaVon King, businessman Topher Morrison, billionaire philanthropist David Straz, another City Councilman Mike Suarez, and former County Commissioner Ed Turanchik. Technically, this is a nonpartisan election.
Correct.
So what role do the political parties in Hillsborough County play in this? Do you guys support a candidate? Do you take a stance here? What will you do in March?
In terms of the mayoral race, we, as a party, the Democratic Party, will not take a position, because right now they're all Democrats that have filed. So we're just going to let the voters decide this one.
Jim?
Pretty much the same thing. We don't have any Republican candidates running in the mayoral session, but I think we have about a 62,000 block of Republicans who vote in that district and within the city of Tampa, and they will certainly weigh in on who they think is best between those. I think it's going to come down perhaps to a runoff because there's so many candidates in it.
Correct.
And so I guess, so let's take it on that face then, Jim. As a Republican, without someone representing you, who best crosses the aisle and appeals to Republican voters in Tampa?
Well, right now it's gonna come down to, like I said, I think 2 people. We haven't really named who we would like, because we don't know actually which 2 will come down, but we will certainly weigh their credentials and their positions based on their previous record and what they've done within the county, and if we have to suggest to our Republican voters. And I guarantee whoever the 2 are, they're going to go to those Republican voters because they're going to need those extra votes against each other.
And you want the support, too, of the people that you're going to represent. What do you think are the biggest issues, the most important things for the new mayor to address?
I think transit is an issue, and I think affordable housing is an issue. There's been a lot of downtown development, a lot of gentrification in Seminole Heights, and I think it's pushing people out. there's research out there that shows that you need to make $21.50 in Tampa in order to afford a 2-bedroom house. That's not affordable if you live on a minimum wage. So we need to do something about affordable housing, and I think that needs to be a top priority of the new mayor.
Biggest issues?
I think transportation, certainly. Yeah. But Tampa needs to weigh its transportation needs versus the county. We're concerned that everything leads to the city, and while the county taxpayers pick up the tab for what's going on in the city, will not be a good thing. So again, you have to go back to the transportation plan, and you have to go back to our Republican county commissioners, their involvement and how much they can weigh in on that, because you know their districts are throughout the county, and they shouldn't be, we as a county shouldn't totally be supporting Tampa, even though it's the largest city. Sure. There's got to be a balance.
What effect, if any, do you think the 1.5 approximately million ex-felons who now have the right to vote will have on this Tampa mayoral election? Because obviously incoming Governor Ron DeSantis was not a fan of Amendment 4 and is now saying that maybe some legislative action is needed. I think people who voted for it thought, look, we're just making this a thing, that it doesn't necessarily need legislative interaction now because the Constitution was changed. Do you think they can have an impact?
I think that it is a self-enacting part of the Constitution, and it will become part of the Constitution on January 8th. Our plan is to start registering ex-felons in our returning citizens on January 8th.
Wow.
Well, I have to agree with the governor. There's got to be one aspect of there where we can you know, weigh or look at, you know, individually. You have to look at, first and foremost, safety and security of the citizens and residents of Florida. Certainly, I would say a majority of those who are let out will, you know, get involved in their voting rights that they have, and many may not. But you have to look at the impact of who gets out and what they do, and whether they're ready to receive the rights, not only for voting, but all the other rights they have as citizens.
I got a minute left. Looking forward to 2020, the $64,000 question I own, who's going to be the Democratic candidate? Is it going to be a woman? Is it someone, do they need a political outsider? What are your thoughts?
You know, I think it's anybody's guess at this point in time. I think it's going to look a little bit like the Republican election in 2016.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yep.
There are going to be at least 20 candidates.
Jim, who would Trump be most afraid of running against?
That's a good question. I don't think he's afraid of running against anybody.
You're right. I don't think he is either.
I think he is building a strong constituency in Florida. He now has another Republican senator, and he has his hand-selected governor, so to speak, who together between the three of them will put together a pretty strong effort for winning Florida again.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for a Democrat in Florida. Jim Waurishuk of the Hillsborough County Republicans, Ione Townsend of the Hillsborough County Democrats. So nice to close out the year with the two of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.